Hi everybody, and welcome to the next transmission here on the Global Dandelion Plant Immersion. Today it's my great pleasure and privilege to be in discussion with my dear sister, author, pilgrimage leader and energy weaver, Sandra Corcoran. Hi Sandy, how are you doing today?
Good, David, how are you today?
I'm doing real good and excited to get into this chat that we're going to have today about the 8-8 Lionsgate portal. Now, we've been friends for many years, and perhaps you could just share with the audience, with the people on the immersion, just a little bit about what you do in terms of the pilgrims that you lead to places like Egypt.
Well, for about 30 years, I've been taking people down to South America and to work with the Peruvian people. About 12 years ago, I was called to start to work in Egypt with the portals and the stargates that are there. And I also take women to the south of France to work with the divine feminine matrix. In my straight work, I do therapy and read the Thoth Tarot and do dream decoding. But really, my passion comes from taking people on these spiritual sojourns and introducing them to the energies of the different portals and stargates that we visit.
Right, and so we got to know each other first of all at one of our events in Ireland many moons ago now, and since then I know you've also worked with people like Sergio Magana here in Mexico. You've worked with the traditions in many lands, and I think when we first met you were still actually running or just had finished running trips down to Peru to work with the sacred medicine ayahuasca. And so I know you've worked with many different indigenous cultures and different medicines, and Egypt has been a big part of that, right? So I had my spiritual awakening in Egypt back in 2010, and it was also under the tutorship of Sekhmet, one of the cat deities, which we're going to be talking about today. But one of the big things that's come through on the Dandelion Immersion, particularly for me, that's made itself apparent is the feline leonine cat energy that Dandelion exhibits, and how he's related to the royal noble heart, which of course all nicely fits in with the Lionsgate portal, with the Leo energy and the energy of Egypt. So perhaps we could start by looking into the Lionsgate portal, the 8-8 configuration, and perhaps you could share more of how you understand that and what you think it's about, and how we can work with it.
Okay, so I believe Lionsgate extends further than just 8-8, but that's the pinnacle of the energy for the portal. And I believe it's a powerful time for raising consciousness, which is, I think, really important right now, because a lot of people, when they talk about consciousness, they also talk about ascension. And one of the personal issues I have with that is we are in an ascended timeline because of the timelines that are meeting up now, the photon belt, etc. But it's really about embodying. And if you can't embody your energy, if you can't ground your energy into your physical form, this vehicle that we were given for this timeline, then you're not going to be able to experience the ability to manifest, to intuit, or to take this to a higher level, which at this point we're all being led to be capable of doing. I don't think you need a guru or a priest or a rabbi or anybody else to do that. Maybe a tree. But other than that, I just think that that particular date is really when the portal is the most open and the energy frequencies are the easiest to acquire. But you have to take it in through the heart. I mean, the heart is really the important brain that we're dealing with. So it unites the gut, which is one brain, and the head, which is another brain. It's all about being heart-centered. Leo is all about being heart-centered. And I believe that's what the Lionsgate portal is also about.
Right, which makes total sense to me. One of the things I've come to understand in my own journey is that the heart and unconditional love is also fifth dimensional consciousness. And,
Right.
I think what you said is super important, is that sometimes in the spiritual space, there can be a tendency to want to reach out beyond the physical domain and somewhat ignore the 3D. And what I've come to see in myself and on my own journey, and again, Dandelion's brought this really into my awareness, is that we have to be completely embodied and coherent in the 3D, and our body has to be coherent because we've dealt with the emotional traumas. And if those things are somehow misaligned or we're not aligned in our heart, then it's very difficult to be fully embodied and receive the amazing energies that are coming through, right?
And I think that's an important piece that you just said, to receive. It really isn't about going out of body. I think there are too many people that are ungrounded at this point, both with the woo-woo and with the fear. And when we talk about dimensions, we're really talking about frequency, and all those dimensions exist already. So it's a matter of being able to hold a frequency at a different level past your 3D sensorial body's operation to be able to acquire that other information that's always present at those other levels. And from my point of view, I think we also occupy those other levels. There's some aspect of us that's on those higher dimensional planes, which is why it's so important on this 3D level at this time to remember those parts of ourselves. That's really what the ascension is about, is remembering those parts of ourselves, from my perspective.
I couldn't actually agree more, and I think that this is the great remembering, and what I'm sensing with Dandelion, with this Lionsgate portal, is the opportunity to remember more about ourselves. Remember, as you've so beautifully said, that there is some aspect of us that is always residing on all layers of consciousness. And if we can remember that, then we start to open the possibility to reconnect to those parts of ourselves, which is exactly how I understand the ascension process too. It's a remembrance of ourselves at those various other frequencies.
And I think that's, one of the issues for a lot of people right now. It's not that they're dummied down, but that there's so much on the 3D in the world right now in the energies that's trying to keep that suppressed, that there are a lot of factions of other parts of ourselves that are already here, already embodied, as well as other galactic beings that can't step in and change the timelines for us. But if we can remember, they're there waiting to kind of turn that switch for us so that we can remember what we came here to do. I think the hardest part of this planet is that all of those memories get shut off. We knew that prior to writing the contract and coming here. But now that we're here, it's like, how do I bring that back into some form that I can work with? And I think you see a lot of people right now struggling with that.
Right, I think that's a really good way of putting it, and it's kind of like ironic, right, that we know coming in that we're going to suffer amnesia, and then somewhere along the line we have to remember from that amnesic space that we signed a contract that was part of the contract. So, and
I think people and I'm not saying this with any level of hubris, but you and I have talked a lot about this before. I know I've done a lot of sojourns here on the earth. I know you have too. I think in that initial flood of those who came here to release the energy, to empower the library of energies, people, plants that were here, I think what happened is we've been trying to remember for such a long time, and it's like we're being tracked. Our brothers, our sisters, our galactic brothers and sisters know we're here. We've all been identified already. But I think that they're hoping that we can wake up to a process that we agreed to a millennia ago. I don't think this was just my last lifetime or your last lifetime. I think we've been at this for a very long time, kind of as the scouts that went ahead and then got swept up in the denseness.
Right, and I think that is an important point, that the cycle of time that we've been in up until very recently, possibly even maybe the winter solstice of last year, I saw a significant switch in the frequencies and the energies was very, very dense. And when I've been working across other timelines where other aspects of myself are still present and still at work, maybe in trauma, maybe in pain, maybe in a good space. Those timelines are all concurrent, they're all still vibrating, and me right now in this time space is the conclusion or culmination, you could say, of all of those things going on. And so when we do those work across the timelines, we're affecting the present moment too. And I really strongly agree that some of us have probably been here quite a long time working on this, and now for the first time in a very long time we're being given the window or the portal from which we can bring all of those bits of ourselves back and remember who we are, embody it here, but looking at it from the 5D perspective so that we can see the journey that we've taken, understand its complexity, maybe not fully because that would be a lot, but understand the route that we've taken, and understand in this moment why a plant like Dandelion, who is a time lord, a master of time, is stepping up to show us, it's like, okay guys, like, are you ready to receive the memory of who you are?
I think too, what the Time Lords have shown us is, at least on Earth, which is a very concretized, dense planet. She herself is also changing frequency at this time. We've always gone through plagues and floods and earthquakes, because that's what this planet is about. It's concretized denseness that has to be shaken up from time to time. One of the things my primary native teacher, Grandmother Twyla Nietzsche, told me is that when humanity came and then tried to conquer the soil, and then they took down the first tree without asking permission, and then they dug into the oceans, and then they dug into the moon. But when they dug into the sun, which I think we've already tried to do and started to do, it would change the frequency, and it would change the opening between the sun as kind of our galactic energetic father, and that would usher in what she considered the fifth world. And the fifth world was moving past the 3D through 4D, because it was important to get through the differential of 4D, which isn't quite at a higher octave. And that when you're able to hold that frequency, which as human beings, we still can't do 24/7, 365 days, but we would start to experience things differently. We would see things, but not be caught up in the web of them. We'd be able to not, we would be able to distance ourselves. We wouldn't be non-compassionate about what was going on. We wouldn't get caught in the illusion and the delusions of what keeps trying to ground us in fear to this 3D movie that it's getting old.
Right, it's definitely getting old. I mean, it's like, you know, I remember one of my teachers expressing that this is the greatest psychedelic trip you're ever going to get involved in. When you go on the medicine or you take a drink, you're going back to your natural state of being, and some part of you signed up to be in this crazy experience, which I think is quite a useful way of flipping things on its head. But from what you've just shared, that's totally been my experience. And it's just like, yeah, the fourth dimension, sometimes people think that we have to progress to the fourth to get to the fifth. And I don't quite understand it that way. It's like the third and the fourth are intrinsically linked, because the fourth dimension is the human emotional space, or it's where all of our emotions get expressed. And if that's in a place of distortion or incoherence, then the channels to our 5D self, we can still access them, but it's a bit more like an intermittent signal that sometimes, oh, we're in a clear space, and then sometimes we're like, you know, exactly. It looks like, you know, the radio's broken or something. And I feel exactly. that a lot of what is happening for us right now is the encouragement to be more in that clear channel.
Yes, but be more in that clear channel by staying intact in the heart and in the higher mind. I think, you know, at some point, God, great mystery, the creator, the I am, the goddess, the all that is, whatever you want to call that energy, that presence, is the higher mind that has a heart. And the heart energy wanted to experience all levels of itself. We're kind of, you know, we at planet Earth are kind of in the last regions of galactic planetary systems that have been around for billions and billions of years, which is, I think, kind of leads into that whole talk you and I have had before about, well, why did the Mayans spring up, what we say 3,100 years ago, and the Egyptians spring up 3,100 years ago, when in fact their histories go back 10,000 years. So did that happen when Atlantis flipped? Is that a reality? Well, a lot of people like Casey and Nostradamus and Blavatsky say it is. Were we at that point impregnated by galactic beings that were trying to bring us back to some semblance of higher mind? But at the same time, there were others that were trying to keep us in a servitude kind of placement. Was it the high priests and priestesses from those areas of Lemuria and Atlantis that were coming forward into Egypt and the Mayan lands? What I think is staggering is the Mayans have this whole sense of the dragon people, the snake people that came from the east, okay? And the Egyptians have the dragon people and the bird people that came from the west. So were these just initially outcroppings of a civilization that already existed, that had already been here for millennia? I mean, I can't prove that, but I believe that from a lot of the experiences I've had.
Right, and I would agree with that too, from what I've come to understand. And of course, there are many connections between the land that I'm currently in Mexico, and
Yep.
the land of Egypt, and there is a a link there with Thoth. Now,
Yes.
there are many different ways of looking at this, but Thoth is also meant to be Hermes and Apollo, also Quetzalcoatl, possibly even Enki. So, we can see that the technological, initiatives were coming from the same beings, and the different cultures have remembered them in the same way. But if you go to Peru and you go to Sacsayhuaman, for example, you can see the stratigraphy of the technology actually diminishing as time has gone on. Yep. And even though in my experience, many of the local Peruvians still tried to claim that this was their ancestors, the Incans, that built those, something tells me that that's not true, that the people that built those technologies in linear time stretch way back into pre 10,000 BC.
Well, and I would agree with that. Even in Egypt, when you look at the Sphinx and you see all the water deterioration on the side of the Sphinx, and you see the Valley of the Whales, where that used to be an ocean, and what was left as the waters receded, like the inundation that always happens when things melt and things freeze, you can clearly see that even though they want to date the Sphinx at a certain period of time, like 4,500 BC, it goes back at least 10,000. And I believe that was never the face of a human being. I believe that was the face of a lion. And there is a friend of mine in Egypt. He studied the spiritual aspects. He believes there's two sphinxes that were actually in different locations, but across a ley line from each other. That was a gateway or a portal. And if you think about, I don't want to get too far off the topic here, but if you think about a lot of these extra-dimensional beings were giants, it would make sense that everything would be ultra big. What we perceive is overpowering now in terms of size when we're standing next to it. I think our history goes back millennial, and I think the galaxies go back billions of years, because I think there's a lot of habitable planets, not necessarily going to look like us. But when you talk about even people like Sekhmet, I believe she was a humanoid. I believe she came from the Lyran star system. When you talk about Ptah is always shown in blue. Did he come from the blue avian star system? I don't know. People have tried to make those arguments, but I believe Sekhmet, at the point prior to her being worshipped and made into statues, was a humanoid being that came here to teach higher levels of understanding and energetic frequencies. I think the reason she gets the bad rap of being kind of like the one who took out people first, she came from the eye of Ra. Well, was that from the eye of a distant galaxy? And she took out negative, dense people on Earth. Well, is that any different from things that have been happening throughout history? And then she was placated when the Nile turned to beer. Okay, to me, that's a story, because she's also the ultimate healer. So I think we see things that we don't understand, really magical beings, and we put our own spin on it because that's the only way we can understand what was brought to us. But if you go into some of the temples, particularly Edfu, it shows an Atlantean crossing. It shows on the wall what I call Pashats, P-A-S-C-H-A-T, that are leonine beings. They're lion beings that were here on the earth helping, supposedly in Atlantis, and helped start these civilizations moving forward again. The jaguar is huge in the Mayan culture. Lion was huge in the Egyptian culture. And they would tame them. The high priests and priestesses would tame them to work with that animal energy, because it's not bound by time and space. And these beings also weren't bound by time and space. It's us.
Yeah, you said many interesting things there, so I'm going to try and look back to a couple of them.
Okay.
You know, and this is perhaps where the benefit of having worked with medicines like ayahuasca or psilocybin is that it allows us to journey into those realms where it's easier to still connect with those beings in their spirit form. And, you know, for any of us who've ever had experiences like that, and I've certainly had a few with those kinds of beings, you realize that they are very real beings. And just because they may have existed here in linear time, 10,000, 20, 30,000 years ago, who knows, doesn't mean that they've passed on. Maybe they passed on from the physical form as we all do. But, you know, we can still contact our ancestors. And indeed, when we travel across timelines, we realize that we are our ancestors in some cases, which is a little bit of a headbender. But I love
time is spiral, it's not linear.
Exactly, right. And so what I came to realize was that we can cut across the spirals to access, particularly when we're working with clients, right, for soul retrievals. And I then realized, it's like, well, hold on a second. If I'm going back into time to retrieve something for the person in this time space, how would that look to the beings in that time space? It would look like a traveler from the future had just come in and did something and then left again. And it started to make me think, oh my gosh, hold on, that's what's happening to us now, that we're experiencing time travelers from the future, possibly even ourselves coming from the future. And then you start to see that time is really something very, very fluid, and that we shouldn't get too tangled up, getting too attached to various points, right?
Yeah, there's a word in the Egyptian language called Sahu, S-A-H-U, and it's a enlightened consciousness energy that can actually, if you take it one step further, downgrade itself and embody DNA in a human form to be able to bring enlightened information. So that was people like Osiris, that was people like Jesus the Christ, it was people like Buddha. These are already energetically frequency high, energetic beings that try to come because they can't change our history. They can help us through their teachings, but we have to embody that to be able to change. There's no spaceship that's going to come out of the sky and save us if the earth flips because we don't take care of her. It's just not going to happen. I don't think there's going to be an end of civilization, but we sure as hell might get thrown back into some lower level frequencies.
This is an important point, because now I'm feeling with the Lionsgate portal that we're being offered one of those opportunities to step outside of those less helpful timelines, maybe that are imbued with lower frequencies. And in the same moment that maybe happened in the past when our ancestors supposedly disappeared or vanished or ascended, I think that we could be seeing the same thing happening again, which is like timeline distortion, but also the possibility for those of us who are aware of what is going on to say, no, I'm now on this frequency, and this is my timeline, this is my frequency. And I think that the Lionsgate portal, for me, what's coming through is a very, very clear opportunity to make a profound statement to my higher self, to the universe. I'm now on this frequency. Whatever is going to happen over here on this timeline, that's going to happen over there, and it's not my destiny. And I think everybody's been given that choice right now, but we have to wake up to remember all of this information.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things that happens with any changing of the precession of the equinoxes, any changing of the yugas, I think you're given a glimpse of it before it actually happens. I don't see this golden age happening to the earth, again, just my opinion, for another 600 or 700 years. I think we're moving towards that with every ability we have to hold that kind of light, compassion, love. But we also need discernment with that too. We also need boundaries with that, because there are energies that will take advantage of that if we just kind of open our heart and say, we're just loving beings. I really think there has to be a balance. There's always going to be dense and light. You know, in Peru, they call it a single spectrum of energy that goes from dense to light. It's not good or bad. It's not black or white. And at any one time in our day, we're at any level on that spectrum around a certain situation, personality with another person. I think if I was to choose what the Lionsgate would offer for me, it would be to take some time in the morning to just be quiet, maybe to be out on the land, maybe leaning into a tree, because they're really our brothers and sisters. You know, we give them oxygen, we give them nitrogen, they give us oxygen. they're rooted in families. We're rooted in families. We all came in with a certain genealogy, but I think the genealogy goes beyond that. Like, you're my brother more than any of my cousins would ever be considered for me, because we've learned from each other and we resonate at a similar frequency. And even when we have arguments or disagreements about certain things, we're able to come back to some place where we can at least listen to the other person. So maybe on Lionsgate, you listen to what your heart's trying to tell you. You listen to what your higher interdimensional aspects of self are trying to inform you with, because unless you're open to it, you're not gonna feel it.
Right, and that's so beautiful, because that totally links to the energy of Dandelion, who wants us to be present and to be with ourselves and to see what is going on for ourselves first of all, but then to see how are we interconnected to everything around us. And one of the beautiful things I've come to experience with Dandelion is like, okay, are you present? Are you sitting? Are you with yourself? Okay, if you are, I'm going to show you now a little bit of the magic that's going on around you. And once you start to see one thread here and another one there, and then you see how they're all interconnected, then it's like, okay, you got the hang of that. You want to see a bit more? Okay, sure, let's see a bit more. And then it goes out a bit more. And it's like, okay, that was cool, let's see a bit more. And then it can just keep going out. And because Dandelion is a star being, you know, I'm now experiencing with him interconnected galactic information coming through. And I think that's another big piece that's coming up right now, is that as we ascend, you know, we're becoming more galactic citizens by being embodied higher dimensional beings in the 3D space. I believe that we're doing something that has never really happened before in the universe, and that is why there is so much attention, so much potential support and help from these beings. But as you've so rightly said, they can't interfere, because this is the planet of free will, and we have to invite those beings in. Then they can come and work with us on an individual basis. If we collectively call them in and everyone does that, then they'll come and help all of us. But it has to be this kind of reciprocal process. And this is always how I differentiate between the good beings and the not so good ones. The not so good ones come in and muck around you whether you want them to or not. The higher beings, the nice ones, always wait to be asked. And that, I think, is a really important point. And again, I would like to perhaps offer that this is a time when we can ask again for that support, whether it's from Dandelion, whether it's from Sekhmet, whether it's from our galactic cousins. And maybe the Lionsgate portal is the opportunity to start remembering that aspect of ourselves too, by being present with ourselves.
Right. You know, it's interesting about inviting in, because that's one of the things that knocked the imbalance off between humans when they just started to take. And they didn't ask the tree, who would have been very willing to give its wood or its berries or its essence. It's that kind of superiority of taking. And I think when you're talking about the negative energies or the negative beings, you have to understand that they are here. I mean, that's part of what's trying to hold us down and hold up, you know, the not just the fear, but the lack of remembrance over our eyes and over our ears.
Well, this is the distortion, right, in the fourth dimension. This is where those interdimensional beings who have orchestrated much of the subterfuge of the last 500 years, several thousand years, probably all or more, they've done it through distorting the human emotional space. And I really feel now that this is one of the important steps that we all must go through, is we must open our eyes to the astral planes and understand how that's been done to us. And once we understand it by looking at it, then it doesn't have so much power. And I think that that's been a large process of what's been going on over the last few years from so many beings, me, you, many other beings all over the planet, is cleaning up ourselves, being present with ourselves and seeing, oh my gosh, where am I getting triggered? Where are my doorways? How am I getting distorted by the frequencies that are being offered to the planet en masse?
Yeah, it's very sci-fi if you look at it that way. No, it really is. I don't think the Matrix was far off in some of its concepts. I think
not at all.
I think there is a matrix. I do think we're kept in that matrix. I do think the evolution is a revolution to move out of that matrix. I think that's part of why, whether you want to call it the Federation or the beings or the domain, why we were sent back is to help remember, as the Earth is also remembering. She was just a library that took on a lot of different energies from a lot of different civilizations, galactic energies, and is now trying to break through this I don't want to call it cabal, evil, Illuminati. I mean, that's just gotten so much play. It's so old, but it's a lower frequency. And I don't think that if you want to learn something about yourself, you have to look at where your triggers are, because that's your lower frequency. And not to be afraid of it. It's only the places where we haven't brought our light in yet. Mm-hmm. And maybe, and I don't know enough, I mean, I know what dandelion represents, but would you take that to help break through some of the personal stagnation that certain people have?
For sure, and this is something that came up in some of the earlier transmissions this week with Pete and with Rebecca, talking about the detoxification of the body, because a lot of the emotional traumas, once they've been in our field for a while, they come into the body and they become dis-ease, right? Yep. And so once that process has happened, then preventative energetic medicine, which is largely what I would do in the quantum space, it's already got past, it's already breached that defense. Once it's gone through the etheric skin into the body, then we're dealing with a different type of medicine. It can all be healed. As my allies have always told me, everything can be healed as long as it's not already been removed. And I think this is also an important point, you know, when it comes to surgery and stuff. But they always say everything can be rebuilt energetically as long as and even then, actually, sometimes teeth can grow back and bones can. So, you know, there are ways around this, but it's all to do with the mindset and what kind of mindset are we carrying. And if we have the mindset that I can heal anything in my field, then that's your quantum truth. If you have the mindset, I need to go to some other guy who's going to give me medication to make me better, then that's your truth. And we can see the erroneous route that's taken a large part of humanity down recently, which is again where this manipulation has come fully into our awareness, because we can see that we've been giving responsibility for ourselves away to somebody who knows us less well than we know ourselves. So there's lots of interesting things there, I think.
I also see that in terms of at least stateside, what's happened, and people can disagree with me, because the way women are being damped down yet again. And I think really what that doesn't take is that whole matrilineal line where birthing comes from. Birthing comes from the void. Birthing comes from the womb. Birthing doesn't have to be a baby. Birthing can be an idea that men have wombs too. It's a point within the body. But you know, even today, coming back from work on CNN, I heard this big breakthrough. And this is where, you know, we're moving into the age of Aquarius, which can be very good in terms of we and technology and helping clean up the planet. But it also has a very dark downside. And what they were discussing was that they had finally broken through with a mouse embryo that is created without a uterus, that they splice the DNA of the sperm and the egg, and they put it in this mechanical uterus and keep it until it forms a mouse. And I just thought, that's how Atlantis went down. We're fucking around with the wrong energy. It just, I don't understand why people can't see this.
Well, yeah, I think that's something that we definitely agree on over and over again. But what I see in this particular night, and we've gone into this space, so we'll talk about it for a few minutes, is that where we have the Aquarian age, I see two very strong possibilities. One is the continuation of the fractal integration with Mother Earth, with the plant beings, which in itself opens up a quantum space through the heart. And then I see the more possibly aromanic AI cyborg agenda, which is also very Aquarian. But what I see with that is exactly what you're just saying, which is the removal of a fractal process, which can happen energetically, and the insertion of a very computer algorithmic process, which doesn't understand the energetic aspects of fractal living, but sees that it can replicate by copying, which removes.
It has no soul. Has no soul. Right. Has no life force energy.
Right.
You know?
So this is also why we get into all of these more complicated situations with the woke movement, which I see now is very AI driven, because it removes the emotional capacity and reduces everything down to a series of binary. Well, if this follows this, then this must be this, which doesn't take into account human emotion or those things that make us human. So I think that this is also very relevant in terms of the Lionsgate portal, that we have to be discerning, we have to be sovereign, we have to be in our heart, and we have to be able to take that step above the human emotional realm where we can get triggered, we can get manipulated, and see the bigger story for what it is. And in that space, we cannot get tricked. And I think that that's something really important right now as we're moving into this phase, is like not to swap one unhelpful agenda for another one by thinking that it's better than the previous one. And we've only got to look at what's happened in Egypt and Iraq and many places to see how does that game play out, right? So this is also, I think, a moment of absolute leonine bravery, courage, but it's also a place of manifestation. So maybe that's something you could talk a little bit about in relation to the lion energy and Sekhmet in Egypt. And I love the thing about the two sphinxes. I've also heard the same thing, by the way, which is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm.
Well, and Sekhmet has two sides of her. I mean, at one point, Sekhmet was the ultimate. She was married to Ptah. They had the child Nefertum, who is all about the blue lotus and the psychotropic energy of the blue lotus. But then as she developed into Bast, because so many of the gods through time have gotten convoluted, you hear a lot about the gods, very little about the female gods or goddesses. They're consorts of the male gods, which I think is what happened when the patriarchy moved in. And I'm not saying that against men. I've known some great men like yourself, but I think Bast, showing just the opposite. Bast is the domesticated cat. Ptah at Saqqara helped build the Bubastion. The Bubastion is based on Bast, and it's all kinds of cat mummies. But when they intermarried, they had Makas. And Makas is a warrior god. He goes out and kills like Sekhmet used to do. Killing as defending higher level energy, not just kill for kill's sake. But it's interesting how they always weave what we perceive as good and evil, which I was referring to as dense and light. And with Sekhmet, she's such a powerful creature. When you go to Karnak and you go to Sekhmet's chapel, I have had people almost faint. People go down to the ground and cry. People don't know what hit them. She's still a profound energy. And when the new Egyptian museum that's going to be opening finally in, I think, November, they wanted to move that Sekhmet into the new Egyptian museum, into Gem. And the people in the country went nuts. It was like, don't do that. She's not going to be happy. Keep her in her chapel where she is. Because what they'd be doing is shifting the energy of whatever that empowered space has been. It's like an altar. It's like Stonehenge or the pyramids. Every time you go back and spiritual people put their energy into it, even tourists who are amazed by it, it's an energy that adds to what the energy already is on a pagan level underneath, on the ley lines, on the alignments with Orion and Sirius. You know, it's funny, Sirius is called the dog star. It's associated with Isis, and yet it's a Lion's Gate portal because of the early Egyptian energy that spanned from Leo to Virgo back thousands of years ago. But the dog star, Sirius, always follows Orion's belt. And even on 8/8, on the Aztec calendar, it's called Pero Day. It's a day to expand the dog energy. And yet it's also cat energy. So that brings me right back to male and female again. I just think it's all combined. I think everybody has a little piece. So to fight over what your little piece is as the truth doesn't allow for another whole batch of information that could come in.
Right, and I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about doing these transmissions is that through sharing, and sure, me and you would disagree over some things, particularly in terms of US politics, but we agree on many other things, and we give ourselves the space to listen to each other and to disagree with each other sometimes, but always remain in that fifth dimensional sense of, you know, energetic soul tribe, energetic brother, sister, we all love each other. And that's the place that we can always go back to when we do have a disagreement. It's like, I still love you, brother, I still love you, sister, but you know what, I don't really agree with you on this one, and we're going to have to agree to disagree. And that's also okay, as long as we're not trying to hammer home our own truth, because in the end, it is only our own truth. And sure, we might end up all with collective truths, but it's also, I think, really important to listen to other people's truths. And these immersions, as I've discovered, you know, doing them many, many years in person, is when we have the sharing space, the sharing is caring, that everybody is contributing their own experience, in this case with plants, but it could be with other spiritual situations too. And if we can sit and be in our hearts and listen, then we have this beautiful collective space that can open up where we're all sharing and listening, and that amplifies not just the energy of the individual experience, but it also gives the space of Dandelion, in this case, the opportunity to expand even more our awareness, because we're taking on inputs from not just one person who's the space holder, but 10 different people who, or more even. And so that then creates a much bigger container in which more information can be delivered. And so I think that this is really important as well.
Well, and if you think that Dandelion does that, the Lion's Gate portal does that, your higher dimensional self is trying to do that, it all comes down to listening, which is really interesting. If you take it back, in the beginning, there was the word. What is word? It's a vibration. You can't get to a higher level vibration unless you listen.
And what better place to listen than through the heart, right? If we're not listening to our heart, if we're listening to this guy up here, the monkey mind, we're going to get into all kinds of trouble, as I'm sure many of us have realized over the years. And, if we can kind of tame the monkey, so to speak, and get into the heart space and listen to the heart, and this is something I often say to clients, is like, what is it that your heart really wants? What is it that you want? And when it comes down to it, many people don't know. Like, I don't know what actually
Most people don't know. Most people don't know.
And I often say, well, then perhaps that's why you're not able to manifest what, you're not even sure what it is you want to manifest. So how can the universe help you if you're not clear? And that's when we really see the distortion that has cut across us and cut across our heart space, so that we don't know what we truly want or what is in our contractual agreements. And this is where I think humanity has got a little bit unstuck in recent years, and we've been prone to listening to other people's dreams and narratives and not listening to our own. And I really hope that this Lion's Gate portal, working with this strong feline energy, can allow us to sit and listen, even just to our own hearts, and see what's there.
You remember that one of the first times we met each other, I was doing, thanks to you, a dream workshop. And dreams are outside of time and space. The dreams are really trying to give us, from that subconscious, unconscious, superconscious level, how to manifest. But so many people don't pay attention to their dreams because they're symbols, or they're discordant, or they're not understood because they're not listening to their dreams. And if you remember in that workshop, when we got to the end, everybody had a piece of the same dream. You remember that?
I remember it was profound and somewhat astonishing to watch everybody contribute to this one collective dream that we're all participating in.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly what this is now. And this is what it's been forever. It's just there's been a lot of blockades trying to push us into a timeline or into time, instead of us understanding that time is concurrent. What you heal across time, you heal in space and breath and dimension as well.
Right, and that's so important as we come into this space and perhaps understanding how we've been distorted, how we've been manipulated, and actually allowing our consciousness to expand and even take on board some of these potential ideas, because this, to a lot of people, would sound completely way out, completely woo-woo. But as we've discovered through working with strong medicines and exploring in our dream spaces, that we can see that actually, wow, that this is why we've struggled to evolve perhaps over the last 2,000 years, because we haven't allowed ourselves to dream that big and consider these possibilities.
Right. And most indigenous people, they do have a sense of their dream time. They do have a sense of the earth energies. They get diminished more and more and pushed to reservations or pushed to arid lands, but they don't lose that contact. And that's what keeps their heart open to be able to survive.
Right. So I guess maybe as we come to the end of this, we've got through so much in such a short space of time, but I guess what is coming to me is the dream space that is being created through what we're discussing, and understanding that we are stepping into a collective dream space and a personal dream space within that collective. And it's okay to dream for ourselves. Sometimes even in the spiritual community, especially with healers, we always have this tendency to put other people first. And somehow that we perceive that's being in service. And maybe that was part of our contractual service. I also feel those contracts are now coming to an end, where some of us who've been on this path for a long time, we now have a responsibility to dream in what's coming for everybody else, and not be perhaps so one-to-one or these kinds of energies. And it's okay. That's not being selfish. It's okay for me to dream in for myself a better future. As it happens, that better future involves everybody if they want to be a part of something that's coming from the heart. But that's up to them to find that space too. And I feel that what we've arrived at here is this potential through the Lion's Gate portal in the heart to step into a dream for ourselves and the collective at the same time.
Yeah, because if you're dreaming for yourself and you keep cleaning out your triggers, then you're vibrating at a higher level. And if you step up, then those around you step up or have the opportunity to step up. And I do think it is about being aware of other people, being kind and respectful, I think is paramount, having a discerning open heart. But I think if we can't do it for ourselves, there's no way in hell we can do it for anybody else.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And I think that, you know, when we start to think about the dreams and prayers that we've been putting out to Great Spirit or whoever, you know, in ceremonial situations and so forth, is that, you know, I think the coherency of some of those dreams that I've heard, certainly in spaces over the years, I'm just like, well, you know, that seems like a great dream from the individual perspective, but to wish to be fabulously wealthy doesn't seem like a completely coherent expression of what your higher self really wants, because the emphasis then I feel is on something that's very material, and actually that can come through being more in accordance to the destiny of what your soul wants. And I really don't think that our souls are that concerned about being fabulously wealthy. It's useful, but we can see also that it's also had a very detrimental effect on the planet. And so I think that what we're looking at here is the coherency of our dream space is dependent on the coherency of our emotional space.
Yeah, and I think, you know, money has such a trigger. I mean, so many people in the healing arts industries didn't want to ask for a certain amount of money because they thought it would define them. And then there are so many people that do have a great deal of money that are being altruistic with it. I don't think it's about money. I've never been a well-off person, but I've been able, because I keep stepping on my path, I believe I've been able to pretty much manifest whatever it is I want, wherever it is I want to go, because I believe that's part of my destiny. I don't believe the dollar is part of my destiny. I believe learning something more about the energy of the planet and the portals on the planet and the stars is part of my destiny. And that's where you could say having this amount of money is fine, or not having this amount of money is fine.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really beautiful way of saying that. And I remember my teacher and also your friend, Dr. Patrick Mamanaway, sharing that, you know, in this particular case, money is just energy, and it just should be seen as something that passes through and not to be held onto and hoarded, because then when it does, it becomes stagnant and it actually deteriorates the energetic value of that. And as you so rightly said, of course, in the paradigm we live in, we need dineros, we need the cold hard lucre to pay for the bills. But if we're in a place of coherence and trust, it just comes. We don't have to make it the focus of our everyday activity. We make the thing in our heart the focus of everyday activity, and then the abundance comes with that. And as you've learned and I've learned, we've managed to navigate the world for many years with really hardly any finances at all, and we've lived amazing lives doing exactly what our hearts want us to do, and taking all of the healing opportunities along the way. But yeah, certainly neither of us are fabulously wealthy and haven't needed to be, right? And I think that's also the way you described it is beautiful.
But I don't respect those who are, because I think then that also puts an energy block up. And I'm being tested on that all the time. I mean, I just shared with you before we got on the call that I've given up my office after 35 years of having my own personal office to do my therapy work. And I was really afraid to do that at first. And then I sat down and, you know, one of my guides is a Lyran energy from the other side. And it was like, well, what are you afraid of? And it's like, well, I won't pay my bills. Well, have you ever not paid your bills? Well, I've come close sometimes. Yes. But the question was, have you never paid your bills? And I see where I do that to myself. You know, it's like, if it doesn't have this structure, I'm not going to be okay. And yet throughout my entire life, I've always had to step out of that structure. So once again, it's like, if you want to change your story, you have to change the script.
Right, and thank you for sharing that, because it's such an important point. And of course, you shared with me that you're giving up your office, and I agreed with you that I thought it was a good idea, because it's also dropping us into that deeper into that space of trust. If I let go of my anchors around me, who am I? Am I still the person that I am, or am I defined by my settings? And the truth is, of course, no, you're defined by who you are. And Dandelion, this is a big piece of Dandelion's energy, is that are you able to let go and surrender to a bigger process that really is about trusting your higher self? Because when we trust our higher self, we understand that our higher self is not going to make our life difficult. Why would he do that? He's only ever trying to engineer or she's trying to engineer situations where we can learn and benefit. And if we're in that place of trust, as I know you are, and I've had to be recently, is that we can open up that space and realize that everything is always divine. And Dandelion is like every moment is divinely timed. And if you can be present with it, you'll see that. And that's when the trust really comes. And you can see that there are higher beings, including your higher self, always at work on your behalf. It's only when you stop listening to the intuition or your higher self that we, and this is where free will comes in, that we get pulled away. And that's okay. That's part of the journey. But if we can pull ourselves back, then we can carry on sort of our path of destiny.
You know, Graham Twiley used to say this thing to me, you know, when I would get whining about my family, my life, my love life, my home, you know, all of the stuff that was falling apart. And she would say, it's in your destiny to change. And this is the universe asking you to change. And I would say in the beginning years, well, I hope I can. And she'd say, hope has a big hole in it. You have to trust. And I'd be, well, how can I trust if, you know, there's a war over here and child whatever over here? How can I trust? And she said, honey, you have to have faith. And I can't teach you faith. You either have it or you don't. And it was always that kind of bringing it back to that simple thing of, oh, what do I not have faith in today? Oh, I have to listen to that trigger of what I don't have faith in so I can reconnect with the potential of manifesting something different to get past that lower level vibration that I'm at. So I'm going to go have a big glass of dandelion tea.
And I think that's a really beautiful place to finish, because it kind of brings all of these things into a place. And hopefully our participants on the immersion today have been able to receive and listen to what you shared with Sandy. I think it's really beautiful, because in the end, it's actually really quite simple. And it brings it back to ourselves, brings it back to the present moment, and brings it back to how much do we have faith in the divine. And if we have faith in the divine, we know that the divine is only ever really working on our behalf. And everything
that divine is not outside of ourselves. The divine is inside of ourselves.
It's right here. It's right here, and it's here, and it's here, and it's here. It's everywhere. You know, and I think that's a really beautiful sort of image to take away and to take into the Lionsgate portal on the 8/8, and to sit and be with ourselves and allow ourselves to dream from that place of freedom and sovereignty without all of these blockages, particularly from the financial world, which is a big gift that we were given from the Matrix. But by the way, the Matrix is also down. It's gone. I've seen the Matrix is removed. And for the first time, this is why this Lionsgate portal, I believe, is so important, is that we're given the freedom, and that we only have to see the illusion box, the TV, to get pulled into that story. And if we just put that to one side and we're just with ourselves, then we can see that the universe is our oyster, really, and that we can dream in whatever we want for ourselves.
That's right. That's right.
So where can our participants find out more information about you, Sandy, if they'd like to connect with you in person? Because we only really gave you a 30-second intro, and we could have been half an hour on all of your stories and gifts.
They can go to my website, which is www.starwalkervisions.com. And really, I'm switching away from individual therapy right now. I want to do more large teaching and still do my thoughts tarot readings and my dream work, because those are really important for me in terms of helping people do their work. So they can find all that information online.
Excellent. And do you have any of your trips coming up? Do you have one going to Egypt next year, or are they all full up already?
I have two going to Egypt. One is almost full. It's working with the timelines and the stargates in Egypt. The other one is a woman's journey happening in November. Both of those are posted on the website. That still has openings in it. And then I have one opening for the south of France in May, working with the Divine Feminine Matrix, mainly with the Christed consciousness and the Sophia consciousness. So.
Wow, cool. Well, look, you know, I'm still planning to come on one of your trips. We've been talking about it ever since we first met, and maybe I'm going to bring you to Mexico to do one. But, you know, I know from all of our chats and conversations and time together over the years that those trips are amazing, and I certainly would recommend them to anybody. Even just to hang out with you, Sandy, for a few days is a great laugh and a good thing. So, so on that beautiful note, thank you again for your time today, Sandy. It's always a pleasure to chat to you. And I hope that our listeners have got something more as they take into the Lionsgate portal in a couple of days. and dream big, everybody. That's what this time is all about. God bless, and see you next time.